I should have known better than to give my in-laws something beautiful. Standing in their doorway that Saturday afternoon, I clutched the carefully wrapped box against my chest, the tissue paper crinkling softly with each breath I took. David squeezed my hand, his palm already damp with nervous sweat. After 3 years of marriage, I'd learned to read that particular sign of anxiety. It meant he knew what I didn't want to admit. This wasn't going to go well. Lisa, honey, you really didn't need to bring anything, Linda called from inside, her voice carrying that practiced tone of Midwestern politeness that somehow always made me feel like I'd done something wrong. I forced a smile as we stepped into their living room. The space was exactly as it always was. Beige carpet, beige walls, beige sofa covered in plastic that squeaked every time you sat down. A single framed photo of David as a child sat on the mantel, next to a ceramic rooster I was 90% sure came from a gas station. It's just a little something I picked up, I said, setting the box on their coffee table. I've been wanting to share this with you for a while now. Robert looked up from his recliner, where he'd been reading the newspaper with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was wearing his usual weekend uniform, flannel shirt, worn jeans, white socks with holes in the toes. Share what? He asked, folding the paper with deliberate slowness. My heart hammered as I carefully unwrapped the box. This was it. This was going to be the thing that bridged the gap between us. The gesture that would finally show them I wasn't just some frivolous city girl who'd stolen their son away. Inside the layers of protective tissue lay my pride and joy. A complete Japanese tea set I'd spent 6 months searching for. The teapot was a deep midnight blue with delicate silver cranes in flight across its surface. 4 matching cups nested beside it, each one bearing the same elegant design. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every curve, every line spoke of a master artisan's devotion to their craft. It's a traditional Japanese tea set, I explained, lifting the teapot carefully. The weight of it felt reassuring in my hands. I know you both enjoy your evening tea, and I thought this might make it feel more special. These pieces are hand-thrown by a master potter in Kyoto. See how the glaze catches the light? And these cranes here represent longevity and good fortune in Japanese culture. Linda leaned forward, squinting at the teapot. She reached out one finger and tapped it, the way you might test a melon at the grocery store. She said. That was it. Just, Robert cleared his throat. That's very nice, Lisa, very nice. But I could hear it in his voice, the dismissal, the polite tolerance of something he'd already decided wasn't worth his time. Mom, Dad, this is actually a really special set, David interjected, his voice rising slightly. Lisa's been collecting Japanese ceramics for years. She knows her stuff. Oh, I'm sure she does, Linda said, taking the teapot from my hands. She turned it over, examining the bottom. Is this marked? How do you know it's authentic? My jaw tightened. There's a stamp from the pottery, and I purchased it from a reputable dealer who specializes in Japanese ceramics. I can show you the certificate of authenticity if you'd like. A certificate, Robert repeated, and I heard the skepticism dripping from that single word. Well, those can say anything, can't they? It's genuine, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. And it's meant to be used. I thought maybe we could have tea together sometime, make it a family tradition. Linda set the teapot back in the box with less care than I would have liked. That's sweet, dear, really, but you know us, we're simple people. We don't need fancy things. Simple. That word again. It was her favorite weapon, wielded whenever she wanted to make me feel pretentious for caring about quality or craftsmanship or anything beyond the bare minimum. It's not about fancy, I said, my voice tighter now. It's about taking time to appreciate beautiful things, about creating moments of calm and connection. Well, we appreciate the thought, Robert said, standing up. We'll put it somewhere safe. Somewhere safe. Translation. Somewhere we'll never look at it again. David's hand found mine again, squeezing. I looked at him, saw the apology already forming in his eyes, and felt my chest constrict. This was the pattern. They dismissed something I cared about, and he apologized on their behalf, and nothing ever changed. Actually, David said, his voice stronger now, I think you should really use it. Lisa put a lot of thought into this. She knows how much you guys enjoy your tea in the evening. Oh, we will, Linda said, but she was already moving toward the kitchen. I'm going to get the cookies. You two stay for coffee? The subject was closed. Just like that. We stayed for exactly 37 minutes. I counted. David tried to bring up the tea set twice more, but both times Robert changed the subject to something about his lawn or Linda asked about David's work. I sat on that squeaky plastic sofa, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that said World's Best Dad in faded letters, and wondered why I kept trying. The drive home was quiet. David kept glancing at me, opening his mouth to speak, then closing it again. Just say it, I finally said. They mean well. They just don't understand why these things matter to you. Do you understand? He was quiet for too long. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I do, and I'm sorry they don't. I turned to look out the window, watching the suburbs slide past. I wanted them to like it. I wanted them to like me. They do like you. They tolerate me, David. There's a difference. He didn't argue. He couldn't. We both knew it was true. 3 days later, I was in my home office when David called me to the front window. You need to see this, he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. I walked to the window. Our house was directly across the street from his parents' place. They'd insisted on us moving to the same neighborhood when we got married, and at the time, I thought it was sweet. Now, I had a front row seat to every moment of their lives. Robert was in the front yard, kneeling in his garden. Linda stood beside him, holding something. Even from across the street, I recognized the midnight blue of the teapot. No, I whispered. No, no, no. But yes, oh God, yes. I watched in horror as Robert dug a small hole in his flower bed. Linda handed him the teapot and he placed it in the ground, filling in the dirt around it. Then she gave him the cups, one by one, and he arranged them in a cluster around the teapot. She poured water from the garden hose into each one. They were using my tea set as planters. My beautiful, irreplaceable, hand-thrown Japanese tea set was being filled with soil and cheap petunias. I'm going over there, I said. David caught my arm. Lisa, wait. Let's think about this. Think about what? My voice came out shrill. They're destroying it. They're using a $1,000 tea set as garden decoration. His face went white. $1,000? Did you think I was exaggerating when I said it was valuable? I thought maybe 100, maybe 200. Well, you thought wrong. I pulled away from him and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard him scrambling to follow. Robert looked up as we crossed the street, his face breaking into a pleased smile. Oh, good. We were hoping you'd see this. Linda had the brilliant idea this morning. See, we don't really drink fancy tea, but we thought we could still use your gift. These make perfect little planters for the front garden. The blue color really pops against the marigolds. I stood there, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. Words piled up in my throat, fighting to get out, but they tangled together into nothing. Linda beamed at me. Isn't it creative? This way we get to enjoy them every day. And you were right about them being sturdy. Nice and thick, perfect for outdoor use. They're not for outdoor use, I finally managed. They're not planters, they're tea ceremony pieces. Well, now they're planters, Robert said cheerfully. Sometimes things serve more than one purpose. But they're valuable, David said, his voice strained. Really valuable. Lisa spent a lot of money on those. Linda's smile faltered. How much money? Over $1,000, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert slowly stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. Linda's hand went to her mouth. That's ridiculous, Robert said finally. Nobody spends that kind of money on a tea set? I did, I said. Because it's not just a tea set. It's art. It's craftsmanship. It's a piece made by a master potter who's been studying his craft for 40 years. For tea, Linda said, as if the word itself was absurd. Yes, for tea. For the ritual of tea. For taking time to slow down and appreciate something beautiful. $1,000, Robert repeated, shaking his head. And you gave it to us? I gave it to you because I thought you'd appreciate it. I thought you'd use it the way it was meant to be used. How were we supposed to know it was expensive? Linda's voice had gone sharp now, defensive. You should have told us. I did tell you it was special. I told you it was hand-thrown. I offered to show you the certificate of authenticity. A piece of paper? Robert scoffed. Anyone can print a piece of paper. Dad, David said, his voice tight. Come on, Lisa knows what she's talking about. She's been collecting Japanese ceramics since college. Then maybe she shouldn't give them away as gifts, Linda snapped. I felt something inside me crack. Not break, not yet. But definitely crack. You're right, I said quietly. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have thought you'd understand why it mattered. I shouldn't have hoped that giving you something I loved might help you understand me better. Lisa, David said. But I wasn't done. I've spent 3 years trying to fit into this family. 3 years of Sunday dinners where you talk about people I don't know and places I've never been. 3 years of listening to comments about how I dress, how I talk, how I'm not like the girls from around here. I thought if I shared something I was passionate about, maybe you'd see me differently. Maybe you'd see me at all. Linda's face had gone red. That's not fair. We've always been welcoming. Welcoming and accepting aren't the same thing. We just don't understand why everything has to be so complicated with you, Robert said. Why can't you just appreciate simple things? I do appreciate simple things, but I also appreciate beautiful things, complex things, things that take skill and time and dedication to create. Why is that threatening to you? It's not threatening, Linda said. It's just unnecessary. To you. It's unnecessary to you, but not to me. And that's the problem, isn't it? You've never once tried to understand what matters to me. You've just decided it's silly or pretentious or too complicated. A screen door slammed, and I looked up to see our neighbor Ken walking across his lawn toward us. Ken was in his mid-30s, worked as an appraiser for an auction house, and had an eye for valuable items that bordered on supernatural. Hey, sorry to interrupt, he called out. But Lisa, is that your tea set? It was, I said bitterly. He stopped at the edge of the garden, staring down at the ceramics now serving as flower pots. His eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. Please tell me that's not the Tanaka set you were telling me about. The very same. Oh my God. He crouched down, peering at the teapot without touching it. Oh my God, Lisa. This is a limited edition. I saw one of these sell at auction last year for $1,500. And that one didn't have the full cup set. Robert and Linda had gone very still. $1,500? Robert's voice came out strangled. At minimum, Ken said. He looked up at me. Why is it in a flower bed? Because it makes a good planter. Apparently, he winced. Lisa, I'm so sorry. Have they been using fertilizer? Some of those chemicals can damage the glaze. I don't know, probably. We didn't know, Linda said, but her voice had lost its sharp edge. We really didn't know. Ken stood up, shaking his head. These pieces are collector's items. Museums would be interested in this set, and you've got petunias in them. At that moment, Aunt Maggie's car pulled up. Aunt Maggie was my favorite person in David's family, possibly because she'd married into it the same as me and still maintained a healthy skepticism about their ways. She climbed out of her sedan, took one look at all of us standing around the flower bed, and grinned. Oh, this looks good. What did I miss? Robert and Linda are using Lisa's $1,500 tea set as garden planters, Ken said helpfully. Maggie's jaw dropped. Then, to her credit, she started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of desperate, disbelieving laughter of someone confronted with a situation so absurd it breaks their brain. You're kidding, she gasped. Please tell me you're kidding. I wish I was, I said. Oh, honey. Maggie walked over and pulled me into a hug. Then she turned to Robert and Linda. Seriously? Of all the boneheaded things you two have done, this takes the cake. We didn't know, Robert repeated. You didn't ask, Maggie shot back. Lisa tried to tell you it was special, but you two are so convinced that nothing fancy could possibly be worth anything that you didn't listen. 2 kids from the house next door had wandered over, drawn by the commotion. They stood at the edge of the yard, watching us with wide eyes. Are they having a fight? The younger one whispered. Shh, her brother hissed. This is getting good. It's not getting good, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Everyone just needs to calm down. I am calm, I said. I'm actually very calm. I've had 3 days to process this. 3 days? Linda looked stricken. You saw us do this 3 days ago? I saw you do it the day after I gave it to you. I've been trying to figure out how to address it without causing exactly this kind of scene. Then why are we having this scene? Robert demanded. Because Ken happened to walk by. Because I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. Because I gave you something precious to me, and you turned it into yard art without a second thought. We made a mistake, Linda said. Can't we just fix it? Can you fix the glaze that's probably been damaged by 3 days of direct sunlight and fertilizer? Can you fix the fact that you never even considered that I might know what I was talking about? That's not fair, Robert said. Isn't it? Name one time you've asked me about my work. One time you've shown interest in anything I care about. The silence stretched. David looked at his parents, then at me, his face anguished. I try to bridge the gap, I continued. I ask about your week. I compliment Linda's cooking, even though you've made the same pot roast every Sunday for 3 years. I laugh at Robert's jokes. I do everything I can to fit in. But you've never once tried to meet me halfway. That's not true, Linda protested weakly. Name one thing you know about me that David didn't tell you. One thing you asked about, one conversation we've had that wasn't about the weather or David's job. Linda's mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. I'm a curator at the art museum, I said. I have a master's degree in Asian art history. I've published papers on ceramic traditions in the Edo period. But you've never asked about any of that because you decided from day one that I was just David's city wife who didn't understand the value of simple living. Lisa, David said softly. I turned to him. You need to decide something. Right now, are you going to keep apologizing for them or are you going to stand with me? His face paled. That's not fair. Life's not fair. I've learned that over the past 3 years. I love you both, he said helplessly. Then show it. Show me that you understand why this matters. Show them that they need to respect your wife, even if they don't understand her. David looked at his parents. His jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was different, firmer. Mom, Dad, you need to apologize to Lisa. Not a "we didn't know" apology, a real one. We just said we didn't know, Robert protested. You didn't listen, David corrected. There's a difference. Lisa tried to tell you this was special and you dismissed her. You do that a lot. You dismiss things she cares about because they don't fit into your worldview. But she's my wife and she's brilliant and she deserves better. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Not sad tears. Something else. Linda was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I really am. We thought we were being creative. We thought we were using your gift. You thought wrong, Maggie said. And this isn't the first time. Remember David's high school graduation, when Lisa suggested that nice restaurant and you insisted on Pizza Hut because it was good enough? That's different, Robert said. Is it? Or is it the same pattern of dismissing anything that doesn't match your exact preferences? Robert's face was red now. We're frugal people. We don't see the point in spending money on things we don't need. But other people do, I said. And when someone gives you a gift, you honor their intention. You don't repurpose it without asking. What do you want us to do? Linda asked, her voice small. I looked down at the tea set, sitting in the dirt, filled with flowers that were already wilting in the afternoon heat. The glaze on the teapot had a dull film on it now. The cups were stained with soil. I want you to carefully remove them from the garden. I want you to let me clean them properly and assess the damage. And I want you to actually listen when I try to tell you about things I care about. And if they're damaged, Robert asked, then I'll keep them as a reminder that good intentions don't make up for lack of respect. Ken cleared his throat. For what it's worth, if you let me look at them, I can probably recommend a restoration specialist. The damage might not be as bad as you think. Or it might be worse, I said. Or that. David moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. We'll figure it out. But Mom, Dad, you need to understand that this can't keep happening. Lisa is part of this family. And you need to treat her that way. Robert nodded slowly. He knelt down and carefully began removing the soil from the teapot, his movements tentative now, as if he'd suddenly realized he was handling something fragile. Linda helped, her hands shaking slightly as she lifted each cup. Maggie leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You know, in 20 years of knowing these two, I don't think I've ever seen them look this ashamed." "Good," I whispered back. The kids had gotten bored and wandered away. Ken stayed, supervising the extraction like a surgeon watching a delicate operation. When the pieces were finally free, I examined them carefully. The glaze was cloudy in places, and there were some scratches on the bottom of the cups, but the overall structure seemed intact. "I'll take them home and clean them properly," I said. "Ken, can you recommend someone? I'll email you a list tonight." "Thank you." Robert and Linda stood there holding their dirty gardening gloves, looking lost. "We really are sorry," Linda said again. "I know, but sorry isn't enough. I need you to actually change. I need you to ask me questions, to show interest in my work, my hobbies, my life. I need you to treat me like a person you want to know, not just David's wife who's temporarily visiting." "We can do that," Robert said, but he didn't sound certain. "Then prove it." David helped me carry the tea set back across the street. In our kitchen, I laid out the pieces on a clean towel and began the careful process of cleaning them. The water ran brown with soil and fertilizer. David stood beside me, quiet. "Thank you," I said finally, "for standing up for me. I should have done it sooner. I should have done it 1,000 times before now. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because it was easier to smooth things over. Easier to tell you they meant well. Easier than admitting my parents were wrong. And now I've seen what it costs you, what it's been costing you this whole time." I set down the teapot and turned to face him. "I love you, David, but I can't keep being the only one who bends. I can't keep being the one who compromises and accommodates and tries to fit into a space that was never made for me." "I know. Do you? Because this isn't just about a tea set. It's about every time they've made me feel like I'm too much or not enough. Every time they've dismissed something I care about. Every time you've let them." His eyes were wet. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I pulled him into a hug. And we stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while the tea set dripped slowly onto the towel. 2 weeks later, Linda called. "I've been reading about Japanese tea ceremonies," she said without preamble. "Did you know they can take up to 4 hours?" I nearly dropped the phone. "Yes, I did know that. And there's all this symbolism about harmony and respect and purity." "That's right. I'd like to learn more, if you'd be willing to teach me." I sat down heavily on the couch. "You want me to teach you about tea ceremony? I want to understand why it matters to you. I want to know my daughter-in-law." "Daughter-in-law." She'd never called me that before. "I'd like that," I said softly. "Good, and Lisa, your tea set is beautiful. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. Thank you. Also, Maggie says I need to ask you about your work. So tell me about being a curator." I talked for 45 minutes. Linda asked questions, real questions. Questions that showed she was actually listening. When I hung up, David looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Was that my mother?" "I think so, unless someone has replaced her with a pod person." He laughed. "Maybe the tea set incident scared her straight? Or maybe she finally realized I'm not going away." That too. The tea set sat in our living room now, in a custom-built display case with proper lighting. Ken had connected me with a restoration specialist who'd managed to repair most of the damage. There were still a few scratches visible if you looked closely, but I decided to keep them. They were a reminder of the journey, of finding my voice, of demanding respect instead of just hoping for it. The next Sunday, we went to dinner at Robert and Linda's house, but instead of pot roast, Linda had attempted to make a Japanese-inspired meal. It wasn't authentic by any stretch, and the teriyaki salmon was slightly overdone, but the effort was there. The intention was there. "This is wonderful," I said, and I meant it. After dinner, Linda brought out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. "It's not fancy or expensive, but I saw it and thought of you." Inside was a book, The Book of Tea by Kakuzo Okakura, a classic text on Japanese tea ceremony and philosophy. The pages were worn, the cover soft with age. I found it at a used bookstore, Linda said. The owner said it was a first edition from 1906. I don't know if that's true or if it matters, but I thought you might like it. I turned the book over in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the history embedded in its pages. This was more valuable than she knew. A first edition Okakura could be worth several $100s. But more than that, it was a perfect gift. Thoughtful, personal, chosen with me in mind. It's perfect, I said, and I meant that too. Robert cleared his throat. We put up a garden bench in the spot where we had the tea set. Thought maybe you and Linda could sit there sometimes when she's learning about all this tea business. I'd like that. Maggie raised her glass. To second chances and family drama that actually ends well. We all drank to that. David's hand found mine under the table, and I squeezed back. The tea set was safe at home, displayed properly and cherished. But more important than that, I was finally being seen, finally being heard. It had taken a confrontation, tears, and a very public scene involving garden planters, but we'd gotten here. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't the objects we treasure, but the relationships we refuse to give up on. Even when they're planted in the wrong soil, sometimes with enough care and enough honesty, they can be transplanted and allowed to grow. And that's worth more than any tea set, no matter how rare.